Hi, I'm Gary Stockton with Experian Business Information Services, and we're going to talk a little bit today about supplier risk assessment programs. You know, one of the biggest concerns for procurement and supply chain professionals today is mitigating supplier risk, with regulatory and compliance fines increasing and global markets still reeling from the 1-2 punch of a trade war followed by the pandemic. Having a robust supplier risk assessment program in place is more critical than ever. We're joined today by Gerard Smith. He's president and co-founder of Global Risk Management Solutions. They're a leading provider in supplier risk management. And Gerard, welcome.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the invitation.
Very nice to be speaking to you today. So let's wade into this topic. Has there been much of an evolution in how companies are managing supplier risk?
Well, initially 20 years ago when I was in procurement, many organizations self-performed everything. In other words, they'd collect the documents and validate them as best as they could, et cetera. And the issue today is with COVID. With COVID, many companies are concerned. The two things we keep hearing about is, one, the financial stability of the suppliers. Are they financially stable, not only today, but in the foreseeable future? And if they are, secondarily, do they have insurance to protect the client company in case there's any errors, et cetera? So it's really the financials currently and the insurance that companies are most concerned about in terms of monitoring.
Why is supplier risk management, why is it getting so complicated?
Well, it's because companies are starting to source globally, and more companies are concerned about the supply chain and if there's issues, whether geopolitical or whatever the case may be. So the idea here is to proactively manage supplier risk. And so there's really three components of that. First, the ability to do the risk assessment based on specific risk components, based on a client's requirements. Secondarily, having a help desk to try and troubleshoot where there's issues with the suppliers to help them to get into compliance. And thirdly, most importantly, being able to monitor those suppliers for changes in status and getting actual push alerts to be able to act on those. So in other words, getting in front of the problem versus finding out that a supplier perhaps filed bankruptcy or showed up on a government watch list or something like that.
What components should be included in a world-class supplier risk assessment program?
There's really 5 things that need to be included. If a company's looking at their program, want to see what a world-class program really represents, the first one is that it needs to be customizable in terms of which the risk components themselves. So it could be based on geography. Maybe there's different requirements in EMEA than there is in APAC or whatever the case may be. It may be based on spend. I want a deeper dive on my strategic suppliers because I spend more with them than non-strategic. It could be based on risk or a variety of other factors. But the objective here is it cannot be a one-size-fits-all. It has to be customizable. The second one, it has to be able to adjudicate the information. What that means is clearing false positives. So a false positive in our world is that it has selected the wrong company. So if you put Bob's Plumbing into a platform, you may get 100 choices. The question is, which Bob's Plumbing is your company working with? So it has to be able to pick the correct one and triangulate the information. The third one is the reporting capability, being able to provide consistent, measurable compliance standards. So that means having real-time standardized reporting of current risk ratings to be able to report to management, et cetera, exactly who's in compliance, who's not, and why not there. You know, what are the issues that we're dealing with in terms of our supply chain in real time. The fourth one would be the document verification and monitoring. Now, it's easy to collect and manage, if you will, documents, but it's hard to validate documents. And that's the problem that the procure to pay, source to pay, and even the ERP platforms have. If you ask a supplier to upload a document in any of those platforms, the reality is no one actually looks at it. And as a result, it literally could be a blank piece of paper. So you need to be able to have a system or a process where you can validate documents, whether it be the certificate of insurance, the W-9, whatever the case may be. And then the fifth one is continuous monitoring, the ability to manage it in real time. Obviously, the biggest one is the financial stability, is being able to manage it and monitor it so that if a supplier starts to get into trouble, that the company stops issuing purchase orders because perhaps they can't perform to those purchase orders. So those are really the 5 components. If someone asks what most important components should be included, those would be the 5.
So what are the most important risk components in today's environment? What are the things that companies really need to be aware of?
There are really 8 different categories, if you are, risk components that companies should at least address within their program. The first one is obviously the financial stability. It's the ability to monitor the financial stability in real time and be able to identify their issues, whether they're getting in worse financial shape or perhaps even if they're getting in better financial shape. The second one is insurance management. Now, there's an evolution. The best practice right now is what's called digital insurance verification. We're able to now manage insurance coverages, et cetera, endorsements electronically. So we actually don't even have to collect a certificate of insurance anymore. We do it digitally in North America. So that means that we're able to monitor a supplier to ensure that they continue to have the insurance requirements on a daily basis, which is a very unique situation. So you want to make sure at a minimum you collect the certificate of insurance. If you want best practice, you do digital insurance verification. The third one is what's called reputational protection. What that means is we do global adverse media monitoring. So as an example, what that represents is we actually managed about 25 or 30,000 media sources around the globe looking for negative stories, because you want to know if they're caught, let's say, with child labor, or if they've closed a facility somewhere in the globe that you're reliant on, et cetera. So adverse media is very big at this point because obviously things are evolving very quickly. Regulatory compliance is the fourth one. That's basically anything that's a government regulation. So it could be the various sanctions lists. Most people don't recognize there's over 1,500 watch and sanctions lists around the globe, including the U.S. OFAC list. So that's a big one. It could be conflict minerals declaration, UK modern slavery, REACH, ROHAS, California transparency. Anything that's a government regulation kind of falls into that category. And then the next one's the cybersecurity. Cyber would be anything that's obviously involved with data, et cetera. The document verification, we've talked about why that's so important. It has to be able to collect and validate not only the documents such as perhaps a code of conduct, but maybe an NDA or a diversity certificate or something like that. So any standardized document should be part of the program so suppliers don't get continuously contacted, ask for more documents. The fifth one then, the sixth one then would be the social responsibility, which would be anything from, diversity, child labor, those type of things. And then health and safety would be HSC or EMR ratings, OSHA statistics, those type of things. So there's really the financial stability, the digital insurance, reputational, regulatory compliance, the cyber, the document management, and also social responsibility and health and safety. Those are kind of 8 areas that companies should at least consider looking into as far as potential risk components. And obviously, there's different parts of each one of those, where those are the broad categories if they're looking to at least look at best practices.
So with so many companies out there looking to reshore suppliers, and in some cases they're moving suppliers overseas or to a third country, there's a lot of activity in that area. But is it really possible to do supplier risk assessments throughout the world? I mean, how reliable is the data?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is it depends on what country we're speaking of. Is the information available? Yes, there's varying degrees of information. So there's, you can get more information in North America and in EMEA than you can, let's say, in APAC or South America. Is it available? Absolutely. We actually do, we can do supply risk assessments in over 120 countries. So it is possible to get the information, and there's standardized information in terms of the adverse media I spoke about or other things like that. The watch and sanctions list, those are all global. So there's global criminality, et cetera. So there's a variety of things that can be managed globally. Some of it, in terms of the financial information, for instance, it depends on which country we're talking about and how much information can actually be obtained within that country. And then also secondarily, whether it can be monitored on an ongoing basis. Again, it depends on which country we're speaking about.
Excellent. Very helpful, Gerard. Thanks so much for spending time with us on this one. And folks, if you would like to hear more about GRMS, watch our on-demand webinar, Mitigating Supplier Risk in a Changing World. Gerard goes into greater detail on best practices and how you can proactively manage supplier risk management while staying resilient in the new normal.